Hi, good afternoon, it's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. During the course of the day there's probably going to be around about 1,000 people or more watch this video, and we're going to answer this question for one of our subscribers here. He says he's just curious, can you explain why the carbon is off the charts during the recent warming period? I'm going to explain why that is. I'm also going to explain why it shouldn't be of any alarmism to anybody. And at the same time, I've also got to try and find a way of encouraging more people to help fund our observatory. It's really difficult right now to convince people to part with their hard-earned cash when they're already being taxed to the hilt. And trust me, I understand this, but we really, I can't express this, we really can't afford to lose this observatory. A lot of work, over a decade of my time has been put into it, a lot of my money's been put into it, and a lot of subscribers' money's been put into it, and we really can't afford to lose this observatory at this time. And it's really difficult for me to encourage people to do that, to part with their hard-earned cash when they're already parting with enough. And if we lived in an ideal world, the governments would support this, and also the information that we relate to other people. It's really difficult times that we're living in right now. We have people which seem to capture the attention way more than scientists ever could dream of. People would rather watch some really hideous things on YouTube, and when you compare the subscribers to these people that are doing pranks and joking about and just giving gifts away, you think to yourself, well, where has the mind gone of human beings today when they no longer are concerned about their planet, or more than that, the truth of what they're being told? It is so easy to disprove what the governments are doing right now. So easy. I only have to use one chart and I can say that it doesn't make no difference if everybody has electric cars tomorrow. I can show you on one chart, you ain't going to do nothing about this for the next 100,000 years. And even if you do wait 100,000 years, the only thing that's going to be achieved is 100 parts per million reduction. And that will come not by any intervention by man, it will come by the natural progression of the way nature scrubs CO2 out the atmosphere. I will get on to answering that question. I'm sure that a lot of you are thinking the same. Why then do we have a lot of carbon increase at this point? I will answer that question without a doubt. But the important thing is that we don't lose a beacon of light at this time, because there is way too much artillery being fired at observatories like this, at scientists like me and others. And we need to hold on to those. How do I begin to express to people the importance of trying to clear up the deficit that we've run up over the last 19 months at this observatory? We've got £10,000 to clear up before January. I can't do this on my own. I can work like a dog for you guys, but I can't do this on your own, and I need your help. And I have to try and explain to you why this is important. We are going to be taxed a lot more. Our lives are going to change a hell of a lot more if we do not start to set the record straight, and it can be achieved. You have to be positive, and you have to be optimistic, because if you start feeling like you've lost, then you're not even in a position to begin to try and win. Those words you need to remember, because they will reflect on anything you try and do in life. If you believe at the beginning you can't, then you've already lost the battle. You have to know that you are capable of changing your life. Let's get into answering this question. So if you're going to try and convince the global populated Earth right now that global warming is happening, then you're going to want to look no further back than the last 140 years, and you can show them this temperature increase over land and oceans. And it does, by anyone looking at this, look like we have seen a significant rise in the temperature. But this is exactly what's called cherry picking the data. Why don't you compare this with a lot longer term period, and then you can get a better idea as to what's going on and whether you should be alarmed or not. So let's do that. Let's look at the last 400,000 years and try and figure out why CO2 at this point has risen to the level it has. So before we get on to answer the question, why has carbon skyrocketed, well, if you want to call it that, why has it risen at this point in time and not in the past four interglacial periods, is simply because, as you can see on number 5, I've circled it. You will see that we have spent the last 12,000 years going up and down close to the green line, whereas previous years we've gone up as we've peaked in an interglacial period and gone below the green line again back into a glacial period. As the Earth has cooled, it has allowed the oceans and land to absorb more CO2. So what's happened here is, if you look at number 5, where we've peaked a few times above there, we've maintained a temperature. But this is nothing to do with mankind, and neither was the previous 4 cycles, because if you look on here, this is 400,000 years of climate, and you can see that we've been 5 times, or at least 4 times in the past history, in interglacial periods, and we've been 4 times into glacial periods. But the reason why CO2 has increased is because we've stayed closer to that green line than we ever have done in the history of the last 400,000 years. Now, that period of time around number 5 goes back 12,000 years. That's when we came out the Younger Dryas period, and we came out the last glacial period, as you can see. Now, why we have spent so close to that green line is beyond me. I don't know. Maybe the orbit's changed, maybe there was a significant anomaly which has made it so that we stay around that green line for so long. But when we dip below the green line, we go into glacial periods. When we stay above the green line, we're in an interglacial period. And you can see from 4, 3, 2, 1 on here, the interglacial periods that we've been in before have all been warmer than this. The point is that when it peaks, what happens usually is it drops back down into a glacial period. And we don't spend more than 10,000 years in interglacial periods, but you can see we spend a lot longer in glacial periods. The last one, in fact, was 100,000 years lasting. So we've spent the last 12,000 years bouncing close to that green line, and what that has meant is it's meant that the oceans have been releasing more CO2 as well as the land, more than usual. Now, I did say a couple of days ago I would like to go on an expedition with a good team and take more ice core samples, because what I believe has happened there is at the interglacial periods, where we've been in a warmer part of our history 4 times, there must be spikes of CO2 higher than what's recorded on this chart. And what I believe they did is they smoothed the data out, which is what you would normally do to get a best trend on the chart when you're looking at it, or a best trend line. That's perfectly acceptable. What that does do is emit very high recordings of data. So what I would suggest is we go back, we record the samples, and we look for specific amounts of CO2 at the peaks of interglacial periods, so that we can find out whether it did or not go up to 400 parts per million. If it doesn't, then what that proves is, because if we look at number 5 where I've circled it, What that proves is that because we've spent so long around the green line and not dropped back down dramatically into a glacial period, that we are spending more time in a warmer climate over the last 12,000 years than we ever have done over the entire 400,000 years that we're looking at, with the exception of number one, because you can see there we spent around the same time, 12,000 years, in an interglacial period. And then with number 2, 3 and 4, we went into interglacial periods but very quickly dropped back into a glacial period again. But that is why the CO2 levels have risen to the amounts that they are. Now, if you want to do a simple experiment, put a can of beer or a can of soda or pop in the fridge and leave one outside at room temperature, and then pop the ring on the one that's been in the fridge and it's been cooled, and you'll see there won't be any gas really or bubbles forming. But if you do the one in the living room, you know, the room temperature, and pop that one, you'll get more bubbles. And what that means is CO2 is more soluble in cooler waters or cooler fluids or liquids, and that is the same case for our oceans. When the oceans cool a little bit, they're able to absorb more CO2 out of the atmosphere. When they get warm, it's able to release it because it can't hold on to it. That's why in the recent time, or the last 12,000 years, we've seen an increase in CO2. It's because the temperatures of the earth have naturally warmed, and it's nothing to do with man at all. We've only been here 45,000 years, and you can see we've had 3 interglacial periods before that. So interglacial periods are not caused by any means to do with human beings whatsoever. This is what these thickos need to understand at the European Union and other global carbolists, let's call them, crankpots, need to understand. This one chart can disprove everything about what it is they are trying to do. It is nothing but a complete and utter scam, and you should be furious, because this is changing the world dramatically. And you know what? Our children are going to grow up believing that mankind was responsible for the climate that they're living in, and we ain't nothing to do with it at all. You know, we put such a small amount of that 0.4 total mass of CO2 in the atmosphere right now. We put such a small amount of that 0.4%. It is irrelevant. It wouldn't make a difference if we all drove around in 12-litre cars tomorrow. Trust me, we would not change the amount by any significant manner. It is nothing to do with mankind, and the proof is right before your eyes. You can see that this warming trend started 12,000 years ago. If you want to pull the wool over the eyes of very silly people that will believe anything you tell them, then just show them a temperature record going back 140 years, and they'll see it peaking, and they'll go, you know what, sir, well done, you're a great scientist, I believe you, because of the chart shows a warming. But when you look at the real data and over a real period of time, you see something quite different. In fact, you see nothing but short of the truth. And just before we end this video, this chart really makes me chuckle, and I've circled the 2 most important aspects of that. Why that is, it makes me laugh, because if you look here, right, there's an arrow pointing to the chart and the data saying 8,200 year cooling, and then there's another arrow pointing to the present global warming. But just look where the data lines are, both exactly the same, and that is going to confuse most people, isn't it? And this is what we have to put up with. How can you calling one thing and then on the other hand warming when they're at the same level together? Which is it? Well, it just depends on whether you're looking at data that's only 140 years old, showing you a little bit of a rise in the temperature, and not going back even 8,200 years, because you'll see, if you're going to call it cooling at one point and then global warming at the other, then it sounds to me like you don't know which it is. Guys, there's a link down there if you want to help support what we do. Hopefully you'll see that there is, you know, worse things you can do out there than support an observatory trying to put out the truth to the world, which is not an easy job. Trust me, 98% of the people in this world are unaware of what's going on. We need to make that change. Links down there in the description. As always, bye for now.